So I wanted to start just by listening to a piece of music I wrote, because it'll get us into a gardening kind of mood. I hope you don't mind, because maybe this isn't your idea of garden moods, but it's mine. So that'll put you in the mood of how I feel about gardening. And the text is by Walt Whitman. Let me do this. Okay. And I'm going to play it now, and you can just, hopefully you'll enjoy it for a few minutes.
The moss, and the fish are in their place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in their place. The bright songs I sing, and the dark songs I cannot see are in its place. The bubble is in its place, and the fish is in its place. The moss, and the fish are in their place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in their place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in its place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in its place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in its place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in its place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in its place. The bright songs I sing, and the fish I cannot see are in its place. The bright songs I sing, and the dark songs I cannot see are in its place.
Thank you. So that's how I feel about, I want my garden to be. And if all Camden was a garden like that. If all of Camden was like that, that would be nice to have that feeling in the garden all around town. So I first want to say that I'm not a professional gardener and I'm not a trained gardener. I just read and experiment and have fun in the backyard. And I have friends who are what I would call serious gardeners. They're homesteaders and they really rely on their garden for food. And I feel free not to rely on it. So that gives me more room to experiment and do what I feel like. But actually, we get a ton of food out of our garden and I give it away. And that's a wonderful thing. So this picture here is Andrea, my partner, in the backyard a few years ago. You can see a peach tree just coming into bloom. I think this is springtime. Oh, I have this cursor that will, I can show you. Here's Andrea. She's raking. Can you see her? Yeah, there's a lot going on. So this is the peach tree right here. These are some peas growing, and these are strings for the peas. These are walking onions underneath the peach tree, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go on to my next page and see what happens. Okay, so these are my feelings about the garden. I want to minimize plastic and petroleum products. I've been really feeling sick about all the cracked, plastic pots and junk and plastic bags and everything. So I'm trying to minimize. I haven't totally succeeded, but that's a major goal of me in life in general, because it's making me feel so bad. But that's definitely a garden goal. I want to minimize expensive inputs, so I feel more self-sufficient and I don't have to spend a lot of money on the garden. And I also want to minimize unpleasant work. And that, I think, may vary from person to person. I pretty much like planting and pruning and harvesting. I don't like digging, and I don't like, what's the other thing? Oh, weeding. I don't like weeding. So I try to avoid those things and make it so I can do those less. And then I want to maximize my pleasure of the garden, also the bounty of the garden and how I can be generous with it and how it's generous to me. Nurturing nature, of course, which has become more and more, well, I don't really know. I feel like when I started, I was more involved with vegetable gardening. And then the longer I'm doing this, the more I bring in natives and see how the animals are responding to the garden. And but connecting is something that is also really important. Connecting with the garden itself, what's going on there, and connecting with the neighborhood and with my friends, my fellow gardeners, and then sharing seeds and plants material is a really fun thing to do if you're a gardener, which also helps us with generosity. So, and then there's the resilience and regeneration. I can feel things coming back to life around me, and it's such a beautiful feeling. I mean, you can see it in that picture. It's just like, and self-sufficiency with a question mark. We were just talking about this earlier in the group. In a certain way, I want to feel self-sufficient, that I can, go into the garden and get some food. And I can have frozen raspberries in the wintertime and things like that. In other ways, certainly in a tiny backyard garden like we have, we're not going to, grow all our potatoes, all our food. So that's something to think about, which I talk about a little bit later, like what to decide to grow. Can I ask you all right now, how many people here are gardening right now? Mostly everyone? Huh? I see lots of half hands. The people who are already gardening a lot, I hope you'll bear with me if I talk about sort of beginning ideas. I mean, my goal for this in a way was to get people who live in town in these little teeny lots to see if you can garden and what that feels like. So anyway, that's what I have to say about self-sufficiency. And I'm going to go on to. So I was inspired a lot by permaculture when I was starting this garden. And there's two guys that started permaculture, Bill Mollison and I'm forgetting his name because I didn't get enough sleep. David Holmgren. They're both Australians, and they made up these principles. And I thought I would just, share them with you briefly, and we can see how they fit into other things I'm doing. I sort of popped up how they work with my garden. But so Bill Mollison set out to say, work with nature rather than against it, something we struggle with sometimes, like, I hate this insect or something like that. Or this weed shouldn't be here. So anyway, in my Tai Chi world, I'm also trying to work with nature instead of against it. Everyone's nature, which is a big challenge, and try to do it. The problem is the solution is a really interesting one. Make of it what you want right now. Make the least change for the greatest possible effect. The yield of a system is theoretically unlimited. It's sort of hard to grasp that one, but I know that there's much more than I thought there would be, and there always is. So that's exciting. And everything gardens is another way of saying work with nature rather than against it. I think that we're all gardening, modifying our environment. Then we have David Holmgren's permaculture principles, which seem more kind of, the way he talks about it is kind of academic, but I'm trying to apply it to my own joy of gardening. So observe and interact, apply self-regulation and accept feedback. That's an interesting one where we say, okay, what did I do? How did it work? Somebody's telling me this, I will accept their commentary, whether it's a person or a plant or a bird. Catch and store energy. That's what we're doing when we garden, but also we can catch water and heat and all kinds of things. Obtain a yield is, part of the fun, getting something out of it, getting not only food, but getting a living system, getting the pleasure, getting the place where you can stand around and do nothing and really enjoy it, or getting a really nice outdoor place to have your friends over for lunch or something. Use and value renewable resources, produce no waste. I think that's really hard to do. In fact, I don't think I can do it, but I do it as best I can. Design from patterns to details. That one is really a fun one because when you start to see the patterns of things, it's a really, not only is it like a useful thing to do, but it's a very artistic thing to do. And the garden as an artistic project is very interesting because it's always changing. As soon as you plant something, it's going to grow and change. And then some things move in and other things move out. Some things work at one time and other times they don't. And just to enjoy this process. Integrate rather than segregate. A lot of that means interplanting. And also there's this idea called stacking functions that related to that, which I really love. And what it means is when you sort of the best use of your time and energy is to have something that gives you more than one thing. Like if we planted hazelnuts for windbreak, and they also give us hazelnuts. And also the birds really like to stand around in them and do things. So that's just like 3 functions from the hazelnuts. There may be more that I don't know, probably keeping erosion from happening, things like that. So the more functions you can get out of a thing that you do. So really, it really appeals to my frugality, which is my natural state. Okay, use small and slow solutions. The smaller we can be with the bigger solution, that's also very frugal and also very generous. Use and value diversity. That's pretty clear, I think. And use edges and value the marginal. these edges where one thing slides into another. Like in a lot of our lots in town, there's this place between two lots in the back where there's like some trees or something that grew up there. And in my yard, there are Norway maples that are like weed trees that grew themselves up there whenever what was there before, left. So the edges are sort of these rich places where you have perhaps something sheltering behind and then something non-sheltering in the front. And on the edge of that, things like to grow, if they can be sheltered and have the light shining on them, for example, that's a really good use of an edge. And strange things happen on edge. So, and in our garden, we have a lot of edges because there's like 4 different kinds of soil all around our yard. So that's just another kind of edge. And then creatively use and respond to change, which is really, it's a gardening thing, but it's also like, where are we right now in the world? We have to do that because everything is changing. And part of my gardening adventure is to see climate change affecting the weather and the seasons and what works and what doesn't, experimenting with that. So this is just my short introduction. And here's my approach. The perfect is the enemy of the good. So perfect is impossible and good is fun. So let's get going. That's how I feel about it. Change is the only constant. I already talked about that. Failure is not a problem. I think one of the things about the generosity of the garden is that you can fail and it doesn't really matter. You can try something else. I mean, if your whole crop failed and you're super dependent on it, then that would be a problem. But for me, it's fine and it's interesting and it makes the next thing better. And curiosity is fun. And everything is, lots of things to be curious about. So then I have to put in my Tai Chi ideas. This has mostly to do with, in fact, just about with push hands, which is the kind of martial arts play that you do with Tai Chi, with 2 people together, which also I find is seeping into the rest of my life in a way, in such a way that I have to keep talking about it, no matter what I'm talking about. So here it is. This is the part that relates to gardening for me. Don't resist, don't separate. And in Tai Chi, you have your hands touching each other and you kind of keep a steady pressure. If one person separates, then you've lost connection. You can't feel what your partner's doing anymore. And if you are resisting, then you also can't feel anything and it's really easy to knock you over because you're rigid. And so in the garden, I don't want to resist what's going on. I want to become more sensitive to it. When we touch our wrists in push hands, the reason to do that is to be sensitive to the other person's energy and their movement and what they're doing. Same thing in the yard and the garden and just out in the world, to sense, listen, don't separate, but stay connected and don't get rigid and resist so that you're stuck in your position, but you can respond quickly. We were talking about that earlier, the need for a quick response in this day and age. Everything's changing so fast. We have to respond quickly. And the way we can do that well is to be sensitive by not resisting and not separating, but just staying in touch. Then there's another thing that I love from Tai Chi, push hands, which is you don't try, part of not resisting is to not keep your partner from what they want to do. Usually what they want to do is like reach your center. And I mean, this is sort of theoretically because we don't play this way, but the play is that you're trying to reach the other person's center so you can, knock them down or push them over or something. And instead of resisting or separating from that, you just let them go where they want to go. And then you may return a little so they just keep going. And instead of reaching your center, they kind of fly off in that direction. I mean, sometimes you can pull them down, but that's the idea. You don't have to stop them from going where they want to go. And so this to me is very interesting in the garden because, as I said before, we all have our feelings about these creatures, like invasive plants that come up, weeds that you hate and they spread, and all of these things. We have a jumping worm problem here now that is very hard to deal with. And I had a lot of nightmares about these worms. But, and it's hard to know how to deal with them. But my new approach is like, well, let's see what they do. How can we adjust? And we'll see what happens. And so the third point is together you're creating one Tai Chi, which is kind of an everything thing, and exchanging yin and yang, which means, one thing is stronger, one thing is weaker, one thing is hotter, one thing is colder. And you can continuously exchange that. And that's another way of responding to the garden, to weather, to realize that within this world things are balancing themselves out, sometimes extremely, but one thing is always going one way and one is another. And that can be helpful in the garden. I hope you can understand what I'm talking about. Any questions coming up? Okay, so I just want to show you our yard here. So this is how it sits on McGonagall Street. Do I have yeah. Okay, so McGonagall Street is here. Do you know where that is, everybody? It's the road that goes up to the Mount Batty Trail. So it's on the side of Mount Batty. It's a slope. And so we're on this side, I guess you'd say the east side of Mount Batty Street. And this is a map from the town, the lot maps. And so our house is that right here. You can see it takes up a big part of the yard, and the lot itself is less than a fifth of an acre, including the house. So there's not that much space there, but somehow we've put a lot of garden into this little space. And this is how it was when we first were playing with it. There was like a lot of multiflora rose and forsythia on over here and over here. And then there were like a bunch of like little saplings of Norway maples in the backyard. And there was this giant pine tree right in the middle that shaded the whole yard. There were actually 3 pine trees on this property that the little boy who had grown up there had planted. And they were like kind of the perfect size when we moved there. And then like they just get taller and taller and taller in this little narrow space. And we ended up like eventually cutting them all down because it was shading the whole yard and it looked like it was probably going to fall on the apartment building next door. Anyway, we did that. And here along this edge were also a whole bunch of kind of weed Norway maples. We cut those down too, with the idea of building a tall hedge that could, there's a apartment building on this side with a big parking lot. And we wanted to make kind of a boundary around the house for some privacy and also as a windbreak. So it was kind of dramatic. We cut down a bunch of trees and we left a big red maple here, which is still in question, but it's still there. And as you can see at the beginning, this is my garden bed right here. It's a keyhole garden. And I think I could show you more pictures now. Let's see. So that's our place. I'll show you pictures. Oh, yes. So this is the ancient days. I don't know how far back, but you can see our house over on the right here. This is where Donna lives right now. She's in the back of the audience. And I always think like, this is our cow. This must be our field and our cow. And I'm like, why don't we still have our field and our cow? But we don't. So Trim Street would be, like right here. You see, it looks like there's sort of some kind of a track there. So anyway, this is the Ancient of Days. And then this is the way the house looked on the yard when we first moved there. This is a bunch of forsythia and wild rose. This is a bunch of weeds and weeds. This is a fire bush, which is kind of an annoying plant. This is a fence that was put up with a mistaken idea of where the property line was. So it ended up, you'll see in later pictures that it moved back and we gained access to this, most of this right in here. Let's see what else we have here. This is behind the barn. So if I go back a couple of pictures, here's the barn or garage or some kind of mixture of the two. So right behind there was this. And over here, you can see the fence. And this is kind of fill over here. And then this is a bunch of jewelweed. There's a ton of jewelweed in the backyard. We still have some of that and we like to keep it. And then here, this is the other side of the house. When we'd taken down some of those little saplings and stuff, and a lot of the rose and forsythia that was crowding out the backyard. So this is kind of like the beginning, 2011, I think. And then this is at the end of 2010, in the fall, I started building some beds by sheet mulching. Does everybody know about sheet mulching? I'm going to tell you about it. So my idea was to put like shrubs up here to shield us from the parking lot of the apartment building, and then beds for vegetables in here. And here's another picture of that. And then you can see that these beds are kind of like, what would you call it? Like a hairpin shape, so that we could just have one path through the middle, but we kept the end. And then here's another picture. This is actually with the next fence, the one that's farther back. And then by 2011, you can see these are where the beds, the brush beds, and over here were some gardening beds, and they started to be used. And then this is the side yard, kind of where you were looking at the very first picture. So if we switch now to 2021, let me go back. You can see the picture on the left is in the same place. And that's what it looks like in 2021. It's changed again, of course, but that's the idea. So I just wanted to show you before and after. And we can, let's see what happens after this. Oh yeah, I thought you might be interested in those squashes that were in that picture of me on the, those are called trampochino squashes. And what's fun about them is they're gigantic. You can eat them as summer squash or as winter squash. They're good in both. And they're just hilarious. So this here is an arbor made of conduit that we have a kiwi plant growing on. And this is a kale and a kale, but right here is a squash. And that's that squash, which eventually grew up here, climbed around the kiwi. And then back in the fall, the leaves all died back from, what do you call that, powdery mildew, but here are the squashes. Do you see how they're hanging down, these giant things? Anyway, I thought that's really fun. And oh, here's Andrea in the garden. Yeah, I wanted to show, I guess I did show you most of these things before. So I will skip this picture for now. Oh, here's more of the current day. This is the front a couple of years ago, but it was pretty much like this last summer. You know, I don't really have room to grow corn, but I thought I would like to grow corn. So I thought, oh, well, let's have three sisters, which is corn, squash, and beans. So I was planting runner beans. my experience with beans and Three Sisters is that I can never make the beans work, but the corn is really nice. The squash here is great, and you can see it rambling over this rugosa rose that's in the front yard. So they kind of intermingled there, and that worked out great. And then if this is sort of a close-up of our porch, which is a barren, kind of awful thing. It's got these old breaking down concrete steps and this rusting out railing, and we haven't had the wherewithal to make it better. So I planted these runner beans up here. And then we have asparagus growing right here, this fluffy stuff. And then we have calendula here. And this is just an idea. And I think there's some nasturtiums too. So, you know, filling in these forgotten places with plants is really what I like to do. And I recommend it because it makes everything beautiful too. And this is the other side by the fence here. The driveway is right here. So this is just I think it's about 6 or 8, probably 8 feet from here to the driveway. And we have here growing rhubarb, cherry. This is a cherry tree that came from a cherry bush that was living here and got taken over by scale. So we cut down that, and then this one grew up. The birds like to move the cherries around our yard. And this is lovage, and then back here is our compost area. Okay, so I'm just telling you, in case you don't know, that it's a good thing to develop a plan in order to start your garden. And the permaculture principles with this are observe and interact, which we already talked about, and design from pattern to detail. So you take a look at the big picture and then fill in. And some things you can pay attention to are light. Where is it, you know, light, and where is it shady, and what can you do with the shade? Water, where is it flowing through? Where do you need it? The wind was a big factor for us. We ended up, I think I told you, planting this hedge. It went like this, and now it's quite large. And then it's this whole side. Most of the whole place is surrounded by hedge, except for the front and the trees in the back. So we made, because there's a huge wind coming up and down the mountain that was really bothering us and the plants, we built a hedge with hazelnuts, elderberry, some little fruit trees and stuff, and it curves around through the middle of the garden to break the wind. So more things you can pay attention to are the soil. Now our soil, if you look at this first picture of the cow again, oh, there it is. You can see the house is kind of up, and I'm sure they put in a whole bunch of fill there so the house had something to sit on, you know, against the slope of the mountain. And that soil is really strange. It's kind of sandy, not really sandy, but it has sand in it, which none of the other soil does. And you know, we dug into it to plant a peach tree, and we found a big piece of like asphalt. So there's all kinds of weird stuff in there, but it doesn't seem to be poisonous. And that's that. And then it's especially sandy right along the front area. And then this area in the back here is like the native soil. It's like clay, which is hard to start with, but it's really actually nice because it holds the water. And it's just the regular soil back then. But then over here, on the other side of these guys, they used to have a dump. The house, oh, I guess it was over here. The house had a dump. I guess a lot of houses had their own dumps. And if you dig there, you'll find like old bottles and frying pans, and it's really not good soil. It's full of weird stuff. And so in that place, we built some raised beds with landscape cloth underneath. And I guess I would talk about that later too. I'm mixing up my whole talk, but maybe you don't care. Okay. So then, you know, another things to think about when you're developing the plan are the invasives and how you want to deal with them, if you do. And that's just a huge subject that we don't have to go into right now. And then you want to think about the convenience of where things are. Like we were talking about water barrels earlier. This is in our conversation before this talk happened. We have 3 water barrels here that the gutters from the roof go into. And we have another one right here that Donna gave us. So we have 4 water barrels. My neighbor who was across the street. And the water barrels are used to water the land and the garden. That's it. And usually that's really great. And we have enough water. If there's a drought, we run out sometimes, but not so much lately. So we have to kind of take care of them in the winter to keep them from freezing up. So make a drainage system. But we built them ourselves out of, well, Donna's was a pre-made one, but the ones in the back are those blue barrels you can get, and you can connect them with piping and use these old blue barrels. You can find any. So then the next question is, existing plants and objects, what are their effects, what to keep and what to change or get rid of? And I put there, the problem is the solution. I'm trying to remember what I was thinking of when I said that. Let me see if I can find my notes for a second.
It's one of the principles.
It is a principle, yeah, for sure. But why was I thinking of it there? If you don't mind, I will look, maybe. Maybe I've lost my view. I think I'm just gonna have to wing it. Oh, here, let's see. Sorry, folks. No, I just have to find my notes, but maybe I don't even have any. Develop a plan. Oh. Yeah, people say you should observe for a year before you plant anything, but I can't do that. So I just keep observing, and I think a lot of people keep observing, and that's cool. Oh, yes, here's the idea of a problem as a solution. So we have all this multiflora rose along the edge that everyone hates. And I was just reading an article by a very famous kind of gardener he's in Michigan, doing, he's developing, instead of grafting plants, like fruit trees and stuff, he's growing them from seed and developing different varieties that work from seed too. He did that for a really long time. And one thing he said was that multiflora roses are great for being nurse plants to other things you want to grow up that are, need some shelter, and they're little and they'll just come up through the multiflora. So we have some multifloras, but we've been adding other things to this edge, and they've been kind of backing off, although I have to back them off with my clippers a lot too. But okay, next. Make the least change for the greatest possible effort. So this is my recommendation to you. You don't have to take my advice. Design for your own pleasure. You probably do that anyway. Take your time, and you have to take your time because things take a while to grow. And I remember when we started, I'd plant these little teeny things, and Andrea's like, what are you doing? And they're like this far apart, and then she never believed that they were going to grow big. And then, the next thing you know, they were 10 feet tall and 5 feet wide. And if they're pine trees, they'll just keep growing. So anyway, that's about time. Keep what exists unless you're sure you want to remove it. You can always get rid of it later. You'll know if you really want to get rid of something. And if you don't get rid of it, and then you're like, oh, you can get rid of it then. But sometimes you get rid of something that you wish you hadn't, that took a while to grow. Don't do more work than you want to do. Like, I like to leave my garden chaotic and let it do what it wants to do, and I go out and have fun with it, and it seems to be doing pretty well. Andrea has more of a tidy housekeeping attitude, but she doesn't do it that much either. So, and there's always advice to start small, like start with a single bed or just a small thing that you can handle, or one tree. But my thing is to do a lot at once. So be chaotic is my theme, and you can also do some of each. So then there's the question of what are we going to plant? And I think we talked about that before. there are things, well, some things are expensive. I think I talked, well, let me just, yeah, I talk about that later, just a minute. So you can plant what you want to eat. You can plant what is thrilling to you. Like if you're a plant person, plants thrill you and you want to have this or that. And you can make mistakes, as I said, and you don't have to do everything at once. And tiny plants can get huge over time, which I just mentioned. So here's some ideas about fitting more food into small spaces. Grow vertically. We use these trellises to grow the squashes up into the air. Also with, I hang tomatoes on strings so they can be much closer together. Squash, cucumbers, tomatoes, pole, and runner beans all work well on trellises. And those are the annuals, but the grapes, hops, schizandra, and kiwi are things that I grow in my garden that also are on trellises and go up into the air. The trellis, besides, moving the things up, you can make these curves so that things can go over the top. And so instead of having this much space, you have all this space. So people do that with cucumbers sometimes to give more room for the cucumbers. Growing containers. One year, I was growing peppers in containers and I had this old wheelbarrow that had a leak in it, it was broken in one place. I put them all in the wheelbarrow and then I just wheeled them around the yard at different times of day to put them in the sunlight because we didn't have enough light. So that worked really well. And then, you can succession plant where you plant something like spinach where you're going to be growing peas or even tomatoes, and then spinach will go and the tomatoes will rise up. And last year was the first time I planted greens in August, and it was the greatest thing. By that time I'm always tired and I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered. But last year I bothered, and we had beautiful greens all the way to December, and some of them are still in the garden. Some of the kale survived the winter. So that's really nice. And then put plants together with different needs so they can help each other. Like, greens can be shaded by something else. Things with deep roots can be put together with things with shallow roots so they don't compete with each other. You can graft onto fruit trees, different varieties. So if you just have one apple tree, you can have 4 or 5 different branches with apples on them. And that's really fun to graft. And it's very exciting every, spring when you think about, can I graft another branch onto that apple tree? Okay. Why did I show this picture again? Oh, I know why. Okay, so these are the walking onions. Do you know what those are? So they look kind of like a giant scallion, and they have these little bulbils like you'd have on a garlic, only big. And it's like a baby walking onion at the top of this onion. So first, when they're at this phase, when they just have green coming up like a scallion, you just eat them, you pull them out and eat them, they're delicious. Then they start to get tougher when they get these things on the top. And what they do is they just fall over and plant another one. So they walk around your garden planting themselves. My brother has some of these and he thinks they're a pain, but I love them because, they're all over the place, and you can also plant them around the trees. So originally I planted a whole bunch of different things underneath this peach tree, and this is what remained, the walking onions, and some strawberries are in there for quite a while too. They just grew, they moved over from some other place, and we had delicious strawberries and then onions there for a while. Meanwhile, these are the ones that are still there. And the other thing I wanted to show about this picture is that right here is a garden bed, and right here is a garden bed, and right here is a garden bed. And it might seem like these are too close to the tree, but actually for some reason they're not. They just do fine. And the only problem is the branches of the peach tree tend to go out and down. So this tree I happen to have just pruned down to a very small piece of itself that stays within the boundaries, if you're looking from the top, the edges of the trees, so that the beds can still survive and have some light. So those are some ways to mix things together. Oh, here is a little makeshift trellis that we grew tomatoes on. They're not up yet here, but they're probably down here. So you can just stick them in these trellises and they really help you out sometimes. Oh, and here's the trellis made of conduit that I wanted to show you in case you would like to make one. This is a schizandra plant, which is Chinese medicinal herb that makes these delicious berries. It's in the backyard. And so what we did to make this is to pound down the ends of the conduit and then drill holes in to put the screws in to hold it together. And that's kind of hard to do, but you can get these little attachments to make things out of conduit. And that is probably an easier solution. We love this conduit things, or at least I do. We usually pound rebar into the ground and then stick the conduit on top of it, or you could put a wider, a narrower tube into the ground and put it on top of that so it stays steady. And you just triangulate it to give it strength. And it doesn't rust, it doesn't rot. It's pretty cheap, and I love it for building stuff. Oop, here's another one. This is also conduit. This is, it's got like hog wire in between it. We had to add some more. A couple winters ago, when we had that really heavy snow, the whole thing just collapsed down like this. So we had to rebuild it. We put 2 more conduits in and more wire. But now over this, we have growing hops and a grape back here and a couple more schizandras. And sometimes I try to put beans up on top of that one too, runner beans or pole beans. And you'll see here, this is the squash that's growing on the rose bush. So there's the little squash. This is our tiny greenhouse. It's good for starting stuff in the springtime. You can just stick it in there, keep it from freezing sometimes. So, okay, this is how to make your lawn into a garden with sheet mulching. So the first thing you have to do is test the soil. And as I said, in our yard, there's like 4 different kinds of soil at least. And some of it's really poisoned with lead. So you just need to know where that is. If you do a regular soil test from University of Maine, they will test your lead. Sometimes it takes longer. So watch out for that. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then you want to lay out your plan. These lot maps are really handy for like having a picture of your place and where the building is on it. Then you sheet mulch and then you plant. So it's kind of quick, or it can be. So I'm going to talk about lead in the soil. Can you read that? Well, I'll read it to you. So heavy metals are the worst thing in your soil because you can't like remediate them with mushrooms or anything. But what you can, so lead is likely close to your house because of the paint that old houses got painted with. Before 1978, there was a lot of lead in the paint. And then near the street from the lead and gasoline. Doesn't seem to be so much of a problem in our yard, probably just because not that many cars drive down our street. But if you're in a busy street, it can be a problem. And then the dumps, those miscellaneous dumps in the backyard that people find. So that's where you might find it. And then if there's a lead problem, there's ways to bind up the lead so that the plants won't suck it up. And one of those is to add compost and organic matter. And another is to add phosphorus. If you're low in phosphorus, you can add more phosphorus and it will bind up into crystals with the lead. But if you have too much, that will give you other problems. But your soil test would tell you that. And then you grow trees and shrubs instead of growing vegetables in those places. You can also grow fruits and beans, and they won't take up the lead. The fruits usually, they're known not to take up the lead. It's mostly in the roots. Some kind of leafy vegetables like the brassicas tend to pull up lead, and you don't want to put those anywhere near it. And if you just really need to have your garden in a lead spot, you can make a raised bed and put landscape fabric under it and then fill it with soil from somewhere, which is another whole question, where are you going to get your soil? But that's a way. We did a couple beds like that. But that's the worst solution, I think, because the landscape cloth gets torn and stuff. So anyhow, here's the next step, sheet mulching. This is a big fat sheet mulch here, but this is in the reading group. we're reading a book by Toby Hemingway, who's a famous permaculturist from the West Coast. And this is his picture of sheet mulching. This is like his ideal best, no fail sheet mulch, but you don't have to put all these things in this exact order. So in his sheet mulch, I don't know if you can read it. The bottom, you have like roots and cracks in the soil and moistened soil. And then you have the soil surface. And then you have, so when you make a sheet mulching, what you're going to do is cover your lawn or your messy area with a new bed. And so you take all the greenery that's growing there and you mow it down low. And then if you can chop it up, you do that and you leave it right where it is on top of the soil. And, if there's lawn there, you just leave the lawn there. And if you have some compost or some kind of undigested materials that might have weed seeds in them, you put them down on that layer. If you have manure or something, you can put that in. Or if you have, if you're going to treat your soil from your soil test, you put that down. Then you put down, what I like to do is layers, big layers of cardboard. First, you soak the cardboard in water for a while to soften it up. You can get it at the transfer station. I think you can still get it there, like from refrigerator boxes. Smaller ones you can use, but they're harder. And you just want to overlap it 6 inches. Put down the cardboard. And then he says another thin layer of manure. Excuse me. Yeah. Or some kind of nitrogen rich material. You could use, cut grass, for example. And then what I usually just do next is put down some compost or some, and then mulch. And the mulch can be whatever you have for mulch that doesn't have weed seeds in it. Although I have to say I use a lot of crushed leaves from Norway maples and they have seeds, but you can pluck them out easily if you have a lot of mulch. So you want to, the top layer, it probably 5 or 6 inches is good. And that will really kill the grass or most things that are underneath it and turn it into soil pretty fast. And usually people do this in the fall so that it can deteriorate over the winter, and kill the stuff. But we sometimes do it on the spur of the moment or in the springtime. Let me go to my next page. Oh, there it is again. Now you know what we were doing there. So this probably is mostly, well, newspaper. We probably put down some amendments into the soil. Then there's newspaper. Then this is probably some wood chips and probably leaves and seaweed, which is my other favorite material that you can gather around here. It's amazing. Okay, so then when you have your bed down, you have this big mound, right? And what do you do? So what I do is use plants instead of seeds when I'm planting into sheet mulch that hasn't turned into a full bed yet. And so what you can do, if you have little plants, little starts, you can move the mulch that's on top of the newspaper away from the spot you want to plant and cut into the cardboard, open it up, dig down with your trowel, try to get some of the plant into a real dirt, but also whatever is underneath the newspaper. And then, pat it down, cover it over, bring the mulch back, but leave some space around the plant so it doesn't get smothered by the mulch. If you have a big plant, like a tree or a shrub, you can do the same kind of preparation, but dig your hole first, put your plant in, and then cut the newspaper, make a cut through it so you can wrap it around the plant and then put all your layers on. And sometimes, we've just done, I think, newspaper and then leaves and then seaweed, or maybe wood chips and then seaweed. And that's worked okay for us. And I imagine that, for trees, you may not even need to do this at all. The good thing about the sheet mulch is it keeps the weeds away, and that's a good thing to do. So that's probably a good reason to do it, just to keep from anything else growing around. You might have to replenish it if you're trying to do that. Or you could plant a ground cover. So does that make sense? Any questions? Yeah.
Are there any issues with
newspaper having chemicals, I mean, is newspaper print now safe?
Well, the print is safe, I think. That's what I've heard. But the newspaper itself could be made of all kinds of things. And my feeling, well, yeah, excuse me. Yeah, the newspaper does not have an issue. I'm thinking about cardboard, which I think what cardboard is made of, you could have issues with that. But I am of the mind that the perfect is the enemy of the good, and that there's all kinds of organisms in the ground that are going around and changing the chemistry of everything. And I just accept that. And we haven't noticed any bad stuff from the cardboard. So we use that. Newspapers are probably actually safer, but they're a lot harder to deal with, and you need a ton of them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I only use newspaper in the vegetable garden.
Yeah, well, the newspaper now is supposed to be made with vegetable ink, and they don't use lead anymore. That's what I've heard, or chemicals in the way they used to. But I am not the authority. I just read what the authorities tell me. So who can say, right? I would ask, like, at the newspaper office, like, what kind of inks do they use? But I think they most of them have switched. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about seeds, and I hope I haven't left anything out, but I highly recommend. Am I too late? Okay. I really recommend growing from seed. I mean, you can go and buy plants if you want to, and if you're in a hurry. But what happens when you start growing from seed, first of all, even if you're buying your seed, you get a lot more variety. It's much less cost to plant the plants. You can start the plants indoors, or you can direct seed them outdoors. I always plant indoors because I have a problem with my mulch, like getting my seeds lost, or seeds drying out, or some little bird coming and eating my seeds. So, or my little teeny delicate plantlets. So I started them indoors, but I know people who direct plant tomatoes, and I also have a lot of volunteer seeds because of my lax weeding and stuff, that I'll get a lot of tomatoes growing up, and I don't know what they are until they come up. It's very exciting. So you can do you can either plant them indoors or outdoors, and then if you plant them indoors and they all die for some reason, you can just plant them again, and you have enough seed to do that. And that's another great advantage of seeds. Then once you start saving your seeds, it's even better, because first of all, there's way too many seeds for anyone to use. So you could play to your heart's content. You can give seeds away. You can go to seed swaps and get more seeds and share. Same thing with like cuttings from plants. Like one of the wonderful things that gardening has taught me as a frugal person is to be generous. And I feel like I can freely be generous with my bounty and with my seeds. And there's several books in the library about how to save seeds if you're interested in learning. It varies for different kinds of plants, but most of them you can get the seeds from, and it's a really fun way to go. And then you feel like you're free from, like, oh, I have to order my seeds, and will they be there, and will they be fresh, and how far do they have to go? Oh, and bushes and trees grow from seeds too. I want to remind you of that because well, I've grown elderberries usually from little cuttings about this big, and it's not hard to do. But also there's a lot of shrubs around my garden that are, now like this, or like this, that I grew from seeds. I'm trying to remember what they are. Well, they were let's see, chokeberries, I think. Not choke cherries, but chokeberries, aronia, I think they're called. Lots of things. I just can't remember now because I didn't get enough sleep last night. Oh, okay. So here, this is my seed starting thing. This is just a shelf, thing that we scavenged from the transfer station or somewhere. And we hung, we got LED lights, like shop lights, and they hang by strings from the shelf above them. And they're all connected to an outlet down the bottom, so you can turn them all on and off at once. So up top are my sort of perennials and weird indoor plants that I'm trying to grow. These are cinnamon plants. You can tell I'm a plant fanatic when I'm trying to grow cinnamon. And this shelf, well, I'll show you in a minute. Anyway, that's the setup. And then some things I'm growing right now. Now, we were talking about, growing our own food and how self-sufficient can we be in the winter and stuff. On the left are microgreens, really easy to grow. You can see I've graduated from growing them in like plastic containers to little enamel trays, which I much prefer. So these will, you can eat them in about 4 or 5 days or a week and grow them all winter long. They're delicious. These are peas. These are sunflowers. And these are broccoli. And I think all the seeds came from Johnny's Seeds. They sell them bulk. And it's such a great way to have fresh greens in the winter.
Wait, you eat sunflower green?
Yeah, you just eat them before the real leaf comes out. And then they get bitter, but before that true leaf comes out, very, very, very delicious. Yeah, they're my favorite. The only problem with them is they have the seeds on top and you have to wipe them off all the time, and it's kind of a pain. But aside from that, so and this could take a whole nother talk, but these trays, the way you do this is I put down like a little, you soak the seeds overnight. You put down a tiny bit of compost and a little bit of dried kelp powder. Then you put some seed starter on top. Then I put a layer of like cheesecloth or something to keep the dirt from coming up into the plants. Then you put the seeds on top. You cover them with soaked newspaper once again. And then you put them in a warm spot. And when they get to be about this tall, you take the newspaper off. You have to keep the newspaper watered. Then you water them again. And then a couple of days you can eat them. Really good. Really farming. Really is gardening. Next, we have, these are these native plants I started this year. You can see I'm back to plastic again, but I haven't found a better solution so far. Hopefully next year. A lot of native plants need to be stratified. Does everybody know what that means? It means you make them cold for a couple months to break their dormancy. And a lot of people do that by putting them outdoors and just letting the winter take care of it. But my seeds get lost that way. So I do them in little trays like this. These are those leafy green kind of containers that have a lid. So I put them in here, put the lid on and just stick them in the fridge for a couple months. And as you can see in these here, there are these little soil blocks. This is how I grow my seedlings now. They're little square blocks. I can, it's actually these things here. Maybe you've seen them. So you get seed starter mix, put it in a container of some kind that's really wet, wetter than usual. And then you can huddle up the stuff under it, and then you push this down and it squishes it down and makes it into a seed block. And it has this little thing to put the seed in. It's only a small one. You can get those at Johnny's. And this is your thing for those seeds.
What are they called?
They're called soil blockers. And they're great because then you never have to buy any of this stupid plastic ever again. And these make 5 at a time, and these make 4 at a time. And, the other thing that's great about them is that you know how inside a pot the roots will curl around. Well, these, because they have air around them, you don't put them right next to each other. It's called air pruning. The roots grow out right to the edge, and then they stop. So you have this full root ball. Very nice. And then, okay, these are lupines, sundial lupins. They told me they were pretty much native to the Northeast and even to Maine, but they don't grow here wild anymore. These are not the bad ones. And these are, I've transplanted them from the soil blocks into these newspaper pots, which if we have any time, we can make some if you want to see how to do it. It's really fast. That's what I love about it. Simple and fast. Takes about a minute or less to make one of these pots. And they just last as long as they need to. And then here's my spinach, kale, and cilantro in that teeny tiny greenhouse waiting to be planted. So that's that, starting my plants. And then the last subject is like the main subject as far as I'm concerned, which is the idea of growing land races or adaptation gardening. And I learned a lot about this from this organization called goingtoseed.org, and I recommend that you go visit them. So what it means is, you know, we have commercial seeds that are hybrids, a lot of them, and you have to buy the seeds every year. We have the heirlooms that are, they're old and they, you know, you try to keep them pure very carefully, and that kind of does like what the royalty used to do. They get weaker because they're being inbred. So what we're doing is kind of growing our own little heirlooms into the present. And the way that you can do that is you take different varieties and you plant them together. And it's easier with some kinds of plants than others. It's pretty easy with corn and peppers and forget what else. What else am I growing? Oh yeah, the brassicas. You plant them together and then you save the seed, and you don't worry about like, is this one separated enough for that one? Which I could never ever do because my yard is too small for one thing. And then, so they promiscuously pollinate each other. That's the punchline of the show. So that's what they're doing. The bees are taking them all around and mixing them up. And the next year, you don't know what you're going to get. And the idea with this kind of gardening is like, no fuss, no muss. If things have a problem, you just get rid of them, save the seeds from the strong ones, then start selecting seeds for the flavor and the other qualities that you like. And I am just a beginner at this. I've done my first year, but I'll show you what I came up with. I got some seeds from these people. They give seeds for free. You can pay a little for them, which I do, from Going to Seed. Sorry, these people. These people right here. So they collect, and then I gave them some seeds this year. So at the end of my season, I sent them some seeds. And what they do is they'll mix them together in different kinds of groups and then send them out to more people. But it's even better if you can do that in your neighborhood, because then you have the same growing conditions. And what it means is everyone like has to throw out their tender little things you have to be careful with and keep the strong ones, keep the ones that you like, keep growing the seeds from them. And according to them, which I haven't tested out yet, by the third year, you have a really strong, delicious plant that is right for your place. And you throw out the ones that have bug problems, you get rid of the ones that have mold problems, and you just keep the strong ones. And so I'm really interested in continuing to do that. And if anyone else would like to try that and exchange seeds, I would like to talk to you. So
Running out of time.
I know, but here are my final pictures. These are some of the sweet corns I grew. Aren't they cool?
Yeah.
And they were all delicious, and every one was different. These are the three leftover squashes. By the time I realized I wanted to take a picture, this is all that was left. These are all muscata squashes because they don't have a problem with the worms. What do you call it? Those cutworms? No, the things that drill into the stem. Anyway, and then these were some really fun peppers that I grew. Not sure what they are. They're hot peppers. And these are the corns that I saved. They're kind of pitiful looking because they were mostly the ones that I missed when I was picking corn. But those are some of those I'm going to plant this year, and some I sent back to Going to Seed. And that's the end.